As many of you know, we have a Theater Fest going up in Banner, North Carolina, that has been planned for over a year. So if we had pre-planned a little bit better, we probably would have had several hundred 914s here. For those of the things like I did several years ago at the Theater Fest, we had over 100 cars and really shown ourselves. So by seeing a small crowd here, don't think that that means anything less than the 914, because we know it's, in my opinion, the best Porsche ever made. I want to keep this focused on the car, so I don't want to talk about how I got into the 914 or what my business automobile planner does. We'll find that out tomorrow. See us open. Our place will be open from 10:30 until 2. I think that's where you're having a food truck up there also. And we've been cleaning my family. Our facility's been under reconstruction. And also, basically, and I mean basically, I wanted to represent every 914 that they made. And we start with the earliest over here, and then with the latest over here, and in the mix, we have the special 914s. So the first one is a 1971, which was actually the Motor Trend Import Car of the Year. Motor Trend started their Import Car of the Year series and nominated the 914 to be that first Import Car of the Year. It was a car that was a standard 914, came off the production line as a standard 914, and if we applied for a certificate of authenticity, all we see is that it was just an old white 71 914. However, we know that that's the Motor Trend Import Car of the Year because we have all the documentation for when the guy won it auto show in New York by Troy, and he drove the car 350,000 miles on his meat routes throughout southern Georgia, selling beef jerky products to convenience stores. However, it was very, very successful because all the other guys drove a delivery truck. He drove a 914. It would hardly get out of his own way because the valves were burned out, even though he meticulously maintained it. And he parked it in his garage. And unfortunately, Scott was a bad pack rat. And this car became buried under old newspapers and rags and who knows what, deep in the bottom basement. And then he had a heart attack and died. So several years later, his widow, Brenda, called me and said, "George, you want to buy Scott's 914? And I said, well, of course, Mrs. Trump. I wouldn't think anything less of than bringing it to our place and restoring it." By that time, the 914 was more of a collector car than a passenger car, and I knew that this was a very special car. So she invited me over, and I looked in the basement, and I could not see the car. I said, "Well, Mrs. Trump, where's the car?" She said, "It's in there, George." Well, I can't dig that out. You're going to have to clean that basement out so I can see it. So about 6 months later, I came back and we retrieved the car from the basement, and I brought it back to our facility, and it wasn't in bad shape. It had some bumps here and there, covered in Georgia red clay, and it would run no hardly. So we took this 71 914 four-cylinder completely apart and restored it. Now, you all know that I'm not on my mind about 914s. I will restore any one. It will care how much it costs to restore it. This was probably 15 years ago. It cost me $40,000 to restore it. And it wasn't that bad. Who in the right mind is going to put $45,000, $46,000 into a 914 that they dearly love? All of us? Yes, all of us. Yes, thank you, all of us. So then Motor Trend did an article was out there on the internet, Motor Trend Import Car of the Year. They did a retro article on it, which is pretty snazzy. They came out, they drove the car, and they had some neat pictures of it. You can look at the Motor Trend Classic and find that ad. But the car is quite perfect now. 340,000 miles, we restored it with all new factory parts. Porsche was very helpful. As usual, if you know the right people to talk with, unlike trying to get the serial number for my long-nosed 911 the other day, they were not helpful at all. I had to go through Wall Street again, but it's not going to get that. And we have the car now on display. I'll be able to see. I'm going to go end now. So we had this basic 914 four-cylinder with the less than the desired shifter and the windows that crank down and they fall and break because they're not a very good window mechanism, and the somewhat anemic 914 1.7 engine. But by 76, they really had something great, and nobody needs to comment about the bumpers. I want to hear that. I love that. 76 is my favorite 914. Better than any of that other crap, like that solar thing, the fiberglass bumpers on. I love 76 914s, and every time I see one, it brings a tear to my eye. The very last year of the car had all of the subtle improvements. Yes, it had to conform to the pollution standards, but a great driving car. The front bumpers were like a pontoon boat. They stabilized the car. You drive one of these down the interstate at 80 or 90 miles an hour. You drive a little 17 down there. Totally different experience. I'll back up a little bit. Whenever anybody calls their place and they say, I need a starter, I'll say, well, why do you need that? And sometimes they say, well, I told you I needed a starter. I don't need you to question me. Of course, some of you know my personality. I don't want to know that crap. So, but usually they'll say, well, when it's hot, it only clicks. That's what you don't need a starter. You just need that $1 start kit, $30. Well, really great, thanks. I've been known to always give tech advice before ever selling a part because I love the cars and I don't really like the parts business that much, but was forced into it because of the economy. So this car, 76 model, the rarest of all four cylinders, 4100 only made, and people called me and said, George, we need a vacuum kit for our car, vacuum line kit, which we put together with Honda logos, and it's pretty nice and it fits and all that kind of stuff. But I said, well, why do you need that? Well, we have a little running problem with our car. Well, tell me about your car. Well, we just bought it. It's got 16,000 original miles. And I said, you don't need that? No, a 16,000 mile car? No way. Well, we were planning on driving it and having fun with it. No. You are now curators of your own personal 914 museum, and you cannot drive that car. You park it. Well, what do? Buy a Miata. So that's what they did. They bought a Miata, and they told me that if they ever decided to sell this car, they called me. Well, they called me probably in 2003 or something like that, and I was able to buy this car from California. There's California emissions equipment on it, but just a very special, low mile. Last year they made them. In fact, no 76 914 was ever made in 76 because the pollution and crash standards for the calendar year the cars weren't. So January 1st, 1976, it would have been beaten by a whole new round of emissions and crash standards. So they discontinued the 914 1275. This, I think, is the 1175 build. But pretty spectacular in its original form, as you see it, stripped, no equipment whatsoever. But just my favorite, I love it, and I will never, ever sell it, ever. So that was the first year, that was the second year. The ill-fated, we call it 914-6, which we have a 71 model over here. They made it in 70, 71, very few in 72, they were never exported. The 71 model we have only has 5,406 miles on it. And probably, I would say, I think I had the noteworthiness to say, it's probably the finest 6 in the world. Nothing has been done to it except maintenance. It is absolutely perfect up underneath also. We can turn this car over and hit the bottom of the floor pan. And maybe not because of my cleanup, but the guy who owned it before me. This car was bought new in Denver in late 71, early 72, because nobody wanted the 6 cylinders, because for $700, $500 more you can buy an 911T. And who wants that ugly thing when you buy this beautiful thing? Or did I get that wrong? Who wants this beautiful thing when you buy that ugly thing with a high stainless steel band on it, a 20 roof line? I don't have a little one. Well, back then maybe they had their priorities mixed up a little bit, but the 914-6 did everything right back then except they had the guys that made Volkswagen on a Porsche. So the people who bought these things didn't even know what it was. They came into the showroom and they were desperately trying to get these 914.6s because the price point was high. And the people said, well, what kind of a Porsche is that? So that would give you an idea of the kind of people who bought these cars and instantly started to abuse them. Took the engines out, raced them, wrecked them, didn't maintain the things because they had finicky parts on them, so quickly fell into disrepair, stored them in their rack in the garage, and that is many true stories about the racks in the garages. So few were saved. This one, because of that horrible color, sat in the dealer showroom for almost 2 years. It's called Willow Green. It's one of the most beautiful 914 colors that ever was, but again, back then. And then especially the Willow Green with the tan interior, maybe that relates well with farmers. So when this farmer car sitting there, the 6 program was winding down, and nobody would buy it. So finally this guy came and said, well, I think I'll buy that car if you change the interior. I can't deal with it. And they said, anything. We'll do anything we can to get this car sold. So they changed the interior. The guy bought it. He drove it cross country, around the country for 5,000 miles. The partner, that was it for him. And a collector in England saw it and wanted the 914 to show at some of the concourse exhibits there because nobody really had many 914s, especially in England because they never made one in right-hand drive. He bought it. He's the one that struck it meticulously. He was one of these fanatical type people. He was an American expatriate living in England for a while, we don't know. Richard Foy Smith, and took it to the domestic concourse 1-3 times, and then the articles written about it, and as with most of these concourse cars, after so many shows and so much cleaning, what can you do with it? It's a museum. I can't buy that car. It's only got 5,400 miles. I'll drive the value walk. You can't do it. What do I do? I'm bored. And he had nothing to do except count his money. So he called me. He said, George, you have to buy this car. And this was maybe in 1990. He made a deal in Miami to buy a Porsche top car, so now he could be in the racing business. And sent the car over here, he worked the deal with him, and made me buy it. Made me buy it, right? But back then, I paid $49,500 for this car, and people thought, well, they already do, but I was nuts. $49,500 for a 914.6 or any 914, you're out of lunch. But I bought it, and I marked it, and I kept it perfect, and I had it in some concourse competitions, and the car remains as new. You can see the slop around the fender well, where the factory, Volkswagen factory, gooped it on there. The fender doesn't fit quite as well because they were on the Volkswagen assembly line, and they said, well, this is Volkswagen, it's not going to be around in 10 years, it's going to be scrapped. Maybe they built it on a Wednesday and retired. So the car now is covered. And I think that a car like this, and you always go by what people have offered, $250,000 probably. That's what is happening with 914. Some of the recent 4-cylinders are sold for $80,000 when they were low miles. So they are being pulled along by the outrageous prices that some of these 911s are now selling. So that's the representation of the 914.6. We also have 2 914 6-cylinder 72 models, which were very, very last year, never exported, and they were really cheapening it. So the 72 models don't even have a 6-cylinder steering column and dual wiper. All they have is a 6-cylinder engine with transmission and 5-1 suspension. We have those, and people say, if they see them, they say, well, I can't do a 6. It's a conversion. No, that is a 72 914.6. So they need to have it. They're all Euro cars as well. So that's the representation of the 6-cylinder. So then we think next, did the 914 ever have any special model? Well, they did. They had the special limited edition model. The only special 914 ever made. 914s were wildly successful back then. I know all my girlfriends driving them because they were so utilitarian. They had wide opening doors. They were very airy. They were easy to shift and easy to steer. So it was very popular with ladies, much like the Boxster is today. So the cars in this marketing campaign to celebrate the Can-Am victories, I think there was a 911 included, they came out with these 914s in 1974 that they called Can-Am editions. They both came in different Can-Am colors with stripes, and they were actually a base 914 2-liter of 73. We had to paint the stripes. These two came out, the so-called Bumblebee and the so-called Creamsicle, and were very ill received because people walked into the dealership, they didn't want to show off. You know, then when we were young, we were on a whole spot, we looked at that convertible top down, so that all the ladies see us, and here we are. And then later, as we get old, we would poop because somebody put in my bald spot, or thinking, you know, what's he trying to prove? So we get a poop. Well, this was pure, here I am, look at me, nobody wanted it. But back then, 914s were hard to come by. They were selling every one they had. So the salesman was looking and saying, "Oh, John, I could fix this car for you. So even you, Mr. Conservative, stickler for originality, can buy it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get rid of those stripes. I will paint those wheels silver, and I'll paint the rocker panels black, and you'll have a nice stock car." There you go. Yes. And that's what they did. So many of these cars were disguised from the moment they were sold new, only later to be revealed for what they are. And I congratulate Jeff Wolsky. I don't know how many people you know him, but he did a very thorough study and promoted these cars to make them what they are today. A very, very special collectible car. The black one, for those of you who know, they should all have Molly wheels. They came standard with Molly wheels, striped front rear sway bars, and center console, and 2-liter engine. That's the Can-Am group with the painted bumpers. This one was from the Mitsuda collection in Japan. The guy at the industrialist at one time had the best Porsche collection in the world. So when Porsche had a tiny little wall museum in Stuttgart, this guy had a massive museum of Porsches and Ferraris. And this was one of the cars in that museum. And he specially ordered it from a Porsche shop with of all things, a Porsche hood bag. Now, can any of you imagine putting a Porsche hood bag in a 914? What are we thinking? 914s never had Porsche hood badges, so we're not going to put a Porsche hood bag in a 914, and if I see anybody drill a 914, I'll be very upset. Put a Porsche hood bag. But this one did, and Porsche put the hood bag on it for him. So that's the official hood bag. When you see it, it looks just fine on this car. So he dispersed his collection. This car, I don't know how he did it on it right away when the collection was dispersed, but the guy that was doing that called a girlfriend of his in New Jersey and said, "You need to buy this car. It's a pretty special car." She said, "Well, what do I want for an old man?" So we need to buy it. So she bought it. They titled it in New Jersey. It sat in her garage and did nothing. And then a German guy right out of Wolfsburg bought this car and brought it to Germany. And before long, he was in the early 9/11 registry at the early 9/11. He said, "What am I doing with this car also?" And so they sold it to me. And I thought, well, this would be my European delivery program. So I flew over to Germany. I went to the Wolfsburg factory, where he lived, looked at him. And I bought this car, and I drove it back to Belgium, and I shipped it to Savannah, and I brought the car here. The car has about maybe 30-something thousand miles. It hasn't had the best life. You can see a couple little nicks and dents right here. But the guy didn't tell me the clutch was slipping. I'm driving this from Germany to Belgium, the clutch is slipping out really great, so you can imagine I'm fingering the clutch very gently. But it was one of the most pleasant drives I've ever had in my life. It was the first time I was driving a road where I didn't have to worry about the cops stopping me to speed. Amazing, 4 hours of bliss, and I sent the car back, and we haven't really done much to it, except put a new clutch in it, having even replaced the rear spring to see what was still in it. But just the rarest limited edition that there is today, and a special one. The other car, the other limited edition, we started, I was going to fix this car up and drive it myself. That's what I say whenever I get 914, fix it up and drive it myself. Well, I never ended up doing that, but that means that I really want to do it right. So we started to restore this car. We bought it in Arizona, and totally rust-free as Arizona cars usually are. And instead of having a rat's nest where the battery was, it had a snake egg's nest where the battery was. So that got me fired about us from Arizona. The car was hit down the left side there, not so bad, things to be repaired. And we started restoring the street, and halfway along, we kept always promoting these cars, all of a sudden they became outrageously valuable, so then we had to turn the other way. So the beginning of our restoration was for the street, the finality was for the concourse events. So we then bought many NOS parts for Porsche again, and put the car back together, and it shows beautifully well. You start to look around, some of the fringes maybe not quite as perfect as I would want it to be, but still a real fabulous car on numerous concourse books. Some of the blogs out there said this car is what it is because of the quality of the restoration. And I sort of it's okay, don't get me wrong, it's certainly okay, but not the best. So those are the two limited editions that are ever made. And then finally, to represent the 914, we added two different 914 models that are not any campaign, any promotion, but truly two different models that were made. And their last but not least, I hate to say, the 71 model here is what the factory had to do to make the racing cars. The cars were very successful racing with the 914 GT, where the lightning body reinforced the 12 plug head racing engine, the steel GT flares, and this is the street representation of that. They had to build so many because of the rules for GT racing, so you had to lot that behind. They had to build 500. Well, they didn't build 500, they sort of fudged this. They built 400 kits, and they built about 36 cars, maybe, a combination of 23 of these, 36 cars, racing cars, and street cars. This is the representation of that. This is the last street GT they call the M471 option package ever made. And I was lucky to find this car. A man who worked for me was up seeing his girlfriend in North Carolina, and he came back and said, "Hey, George, I saw an ad for a GT." What? Yeah. He mentioned it so casually, I couldn't believe it. GT. Yeah. So we're going to pay for let me see the ad. So he ran home, so I'll pay you for the time. He ran home and got the ad, and I called the guy and said, "Yeah, it's GT, we're trying to sell it." They had put a thick acrylic enamel paint job on it in the original color, and they were selling it for, I think, $14,500. And they didn't have anybody interested in it. Their face looked like I wasn't interested in it also. And ran up there. I wired in the deposit, got the car, broke down there. This car raced a little bit, but wasn't too bad. A little damage to the front panel. Took the car completely apart. Refinished it again. The Porsche sell about many NOS parts. I don't know how many they have now. They're trying, but it's still not there. They hired me part-time in my retirement to elevate me for 914 everybody. You have to like a carpet kit and put you back together. Please ignore the polished wheels. When I did those wheels, the old Alwee was not really anodized wheels, so we had to polish them and clean them up a little bit. And they're a little wider than normal ones. This car was delivered with the steel GT flares. As you can see, the front belly pan is flared. Flared fiberglass factory bottoms, 21 millimeter wheel spacers. And it came with 6x15 alloy wheels. Other than that, it was a standard 6-cylinder. But a fabulous representation. And we love that. Blue metallic wall stuff there. So, Gemini blue metallic, thank you very much. Gemini blue metallic paint job, we're very happy. Notice the side markers, that's the giveaway of the factory car. The side markers, just like that 916, the side markers are lower because they had to clear the curve of the fender for the reflection that passed the DOT side markers in. So that's why they moved it. Finally, the last car we have here is the ill-fated 916. This was the Porsche supercar from 1972, and Porsche, the guys there that raced, and some of them in the back of the office were very, very excited about this car because it would do everything better than any little 911. It was faster, it handled better, it was actually more comfortable, it was wider. It was a very light car as well, what it was. Did everything right. They decided that we are going to have a 914 for 1972 and above. It is going to be the superior 914. They're 6-cylinder, didn't do well, but this car will do well, really well. We'll have everything right. So they heavily lettered the interior. They made it very gaudy, I would say, for lack of a better word. Like this steel roof painted very rigid. They painted the sail panel. They added the color key bumpers. You can see these bumpers here. Okay, they are fiberglass on the prototype, but they would have made rubber bumpers much like the 76 because in 73, first year of the front bumper standards, 74 front and rear bumper standards, crash standards, energy absorbing, so they would have been polyurethane. That's sort of why they did the bumper that way. And big heavy sway bars, front were 2.4 S engine with plans for larger and larger engines, and so rigid, so well handled. 7-inch wheels, it was incredible. The car drives incredibly well. Also a 915 transmission with things there, bulletproof, and it shifts like a bullet to a big clunker. So this car, they thought, well, if anybody's going to pay that much for this car, we're going to have to put air conditioning in it. So they sent Brutus, Peter Gregg, to put air conditioning on it, and they got the air conditioning on it some way, somehow. They actually ran the air conditioning lines under the car rather than on the rocker panel on the right. And somebody got a hammer and they hit the hell out the back firewall to make a pooch for the old door compressor to clear. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm no giant in the animal world, but still, when I put the seat back, I don't know, I'm losing a little bit of leg room there because the back of the seat hits the bulge they put over the compressor. Well, it didn't have air conditioning, I guess. And the car then was red. Now they knew how to put air conditioning in it. They had this heavily optioned car with a pepper cassette in it and all of that leather and a Harrington, whatever it's called, Hannigan wool carpeting, all ready to go. And then they figured out, well, you know, those sixes, they're not selling that well, and this car is going to have to sell for more than the 911S. So who would pay more for that car than this nice red one over here? I don't know. I think I like the red one better. More money? Wait, and that's still a Volkswagen. Huh, I'm gonna buy me a Porsche. No way. So the writing was on the wall. They discontinued the car. They only made 11 prototypes. That was it. This car was the only one that came to the United States, DOT approved, and it was the cover car of the February 72 Road Track magazine. If any of you know Bill Warner, he wrote the article, and he has a special affection for this car. Every time he calls me, like once every 6 months, how's my 916 doing? I tell him it's just doing fine, Bill. We love it that it's there, but pretty gaudy car, if you say so. Truly out of the late 70s, and I put my belt bottoms on when I drive this thing. Recently, we did at our shop the first car, Brutus. It's 916 number 1. It was a prototype of a prototype that was actually a real 914.6. This is not a 914.6. It's a 916 by its serial number. It's a special, different breed. Especially different breed. But the Brutus 916 was a 914.6 that they actually converted into a 916. And welded a roof on it, and they put a 2.9 racing engine in it, put a giant 90-liter or 150-liter gas tank, et cetera, et cetera. It was a disaster. Trying to Porsche owned it for a while, hot rods around and hitting things with it, and never got a ticket for speeding ever, not in Stuttgart. And finally, a general bought it. The family brought it over to South Carolina, where it sat in ruin, with somebody trying to cobble the story, the old boys knew with Mondo, which brings me up on another, just to say this in passing. guy by the name of Julian came in. It was pristine 914.6 with a lot of doors gone. And he was showing to me, he said, "You think I could leave this here and show her up?" I said, "Sure, Julian, certainly." And I said to him, "I hope that your car is full of honor." And we both had a laugh. He was the chairman of Mondo Corporation. So advertising product, of course, we had to go to Mondo. But anyway, that's aside. This Brutus was loaded with Mondo, had a lousy paint job on it, and they patched over wrinkle. He had to cut the car virtually in half. Big sections came out of this car. But anyway, so over the next 3 years, we put the whole thing back together at this feature museum. It was here for a while. Oh, pretty damn good. Oh, great. The whole thing was back where it needs to be. It had so many different interiors in it. Brown decided to kept changing the interior according to the latest fashion and kept coming to tell you what paint saying on the interior that nobody knew what the original interior was. Somebody said Elvin had at one time. But anyway, to make a long story short, we put the Porsche cloth in it like Peter Gregg did with this, and he liked it better. And that car went to Paris in February and sold for $1,078,000 with a buyer's fee, saying 914, I mean 916, which tells us that these cars are really coming to their own, and maybe they got my return all set here. So anyway, that is my little line for the question. I have a few more down at my business. If you want to come tomorrow, I can talk in detail if you want to know how we came about being what we are, getting where we are. I want to tell you. Thank you very much.